The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a marvelous masterpiece, directed by the great Peter Jackson, one of the few men who have been able to take Tolkien's word, perfectly put them onto screen. Something that we all love, especially if you've clicked on this video. It's something that I feel like hasn't been talked about, which is a Lord of the Ring iceberg. Through all the YouTube videos, all the essays, and all the content I've consumed over the years, I've never found a Lord of the Rings iceberg. So I'm attempting to make one of my own. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm not going to get everything right. I'm not going to be able to include everything, but this is definitely just going to be part one of multiple parts. And hopefully you guys will definitely like it as well. If you guys look in my iceberg, I have it split up into 5 sections: theatrical, extended, behind the scenes, appendices, and the road goes on. So the way I tiered my list is, it's very simple. At the top, where I feel like the things I've been talking about are things that other people are aware of, things like Aragorn injury or some of the famous cameos that are seen in The Lord of the Rings. But as you go deeper, it gets obviously more obscure. This is part 1, and I'm only going to be covering the theatrical portion of this, so this video doesn't run too long. So first things first, Aragorn's injury. I feel like everyone talks about the fact that Viggo Mortensen, who plays Aragorn, was injured on set when he kicked a helmet and broke 2 of his toes. Here's Peter Jackson talking about that moment.
I'm going to put the camera sort of down the hillside a little bit, and can you try to kick the helmet as close as possible to the lens, because it'll look great if it just like flies past us. And so Viggo did 4 takes. Each take he kind of got closer and closer to the camera. The 4th take I thought was really good. I thought, well, that's pretty close. And then I thought, oh, look, he's got better each time. If I just give him one more take, I bet it's going to look great. So he boots this helmet. And then he let out this scream. I thought, wow, this is strong. This is like Aragorn is like just in total grief at what's just happened to Merry and Pippin. This is really cool. And he didn't say anything to us, but we found out that Viggo had actually broken 2 toes with that last kick. And normally an actor would say, cut, I've hurt myself. God, stop, quickly, get the medic. Viggo actually, feeling that pain, he actually turned that into performance. He stayed in the character of Aragorn. He was letting that pain feed and drive his performance.
Then we have the famous tooth chip incident, where while recording and filming the movie, Aragorn chipped one of his teeth. And instead of getting medical help immediately, he said to the crew, let me just glue it on, let's just super glue it so I can get back to filming. Obviously, huge multi-million-dollar budget of a movie that Lord of the Rings was did not allow it. And he had to obviously get it fixed, and they had to stop shooting for the day. Galadriel's hairs. Now, if you're a huge nerd when it comes to Lord of the Rings like I am, you're aware of this Tumblr post that's been floating around that talks about why this scene from the movies is so special, where Gimli gets one of Galadriel's hair. Well, the short version of it is, the Silmarillion, the book that's based before the Lord of the Rings in the Second Age and earlier, has one of the most famous and prominent elves, Fëanor, craft the Silmarils. And originally the inspiration for the Silmarils was Galadriel's hair, because it had absorbed the light of the trees of Valar. However, Galadriel did not give one of her strands of hair to Fëanor to craft one of his jewels, so instead he created the Silmarils. So Galadriel, obviously, in the story, giving Gimli hairs is a huge moment, because if she denied Fëanor, one of the greatest elves, even a single strand of her hair, yet she gave them to Gimli, 3 of them, that's a pretty big moment, and it's one that I love a lot. And I feel like because of this post, this thing had to get talked about, because enough people have talked about it, especially the Lotr fans and the nerds like myself. Boromir leg script. Many people that might be aware of the fact that when they're filming the Council of Elrond scene, in the books it's a very, very long scene. However, in the movies, they had to keep doing rewrites and script changes constantly that some of the actors couldn't keep up. One such actor was Boromir or Sean Bean. He could not keep up with the constant script changes, so he just taped the scripts and his words that he had to speak that day on his leg. So if you watch the movie, and when he does the famous "one does not simply walk into Mordor" line, he's actually looking at his thigh, which he had the script attached to. That's why you see him looking down, because of the fact that he did not know exactly what his lines were going to be that day. Galadriel's eyes. Well, this one I'll let Andrew Lesnie describe, because he, as a cinematographer, went into great detail and length about why they made this scene very special with Galadriel's eyes.
I wanted to do something special for Galadriel. I felt that of all the people in the story, she was, in a way, more connected with a spiritual world. And I took my biggest cue off out of the writing of Tolkien, which basically described her as saying, no sign of age was upon her, except in the depths of her eyes, keen lances in the starlight, wells of deep memory. I wanted to find a visual interpretation for that somehow. So what we did, Brian and I did a few little experiments, and we eventually came up with what we called the Galadrielite. We went out and bought many Christmas lights, and we festooned them all over this rig. And what it did is it actually reflects like Starfield in her eyes. Because, to me, it's like a lot of performances in the eyes, and I wanted her highlights to be different to everybody else's in the film.
The Gandalf head bump. Well, for people who have seen the movie, and in the beginning scenes of the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf arrives in the Shire, he goes to meet his pal Bilbo, and when he does, he hits his head on top of the roof. That was not scripted. That was an accident, and here it is. Two movies. So originally, Lord of the Rings was only going to be two movies. There was a deal that Peter Jackson had with Harvey Weinstein, which obviously did not go through because Harvey Weinstein wasn't involved, and New Line Cinema took over. And when New Line Cinema agreed to take the movies, they said that it shouldn't be two movies, it should be three. And here's Mark Odesky talking about that moment.
And Mark set up a meeting with Bob Shea.
Bob's impossible to read. He's a completely inscrutable sort of meeting. And you can't really tell how well you're doing. So he made this, Peter and Fran made the presentation, showed a lot of mock-ups, showed the tape, played the tape, lights came up, couldn't read the situation at all.
Bob looked at Peter and said, now, Peter, why would anybody in their right mind make two movies?
Which shattered them both because they didn't quite know what he meant. He said, this is three films. Well, thank God for that decision.
Original casting. So for those of you that are big Lord of the Rings fans would know that Viggo Mortensen was actually called in very late to play Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. It was his son Henry who told him and convinced him that, yo, you need to play Aragorn. This is going to be a great role, because he was a big fan of the books. Originally, Stuart Townsend was actually playing Aragorn and was on production and was filming, until they realized that they couldn't use him anymore because he was too young. The choice they had before Stuart was actually Nicolas Cage, and there are some stories with other casting that were supposed to be different. Like, for example, Gandalf, which is played by Ian McKellen, was originally going to be Sean Connery. Or not that it was like he was chosen, but Sean Connery was definitely on the short list for a choice for Gandalf. And another choice for Gandalf was Christopher Lee, who had put himself into position and told Peter that he wanted to be Gandalf. And he had even talked to Professor Tolkien about the fact that if they did make a movie someday, that he would play Gandalf, and kind of had Tolkien's blessings. But when it came down to it, he made a perfect Saruman, and I'm pretty sure they made a good decision on having him cast as Saruman instead. Sean being afraid of heights. I mean, this has kind of been part of the lore now, where Sean being had to climb to get to sets and whatnot, but the story's a little bit bigger than that. He originally did go on a helicopter ride to shoot the film and the scene where he picks up the ring from Frodo when it falls in the snow. But then after that, because he was so scared, this is what happened.
This particular journey, he didn't take any more helicopter rides. He just said, that's it. I'll walk, I'll swim, I'll crawl, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll walk all night to get there by morning, but I'm not taking any more helicopter rides.
Shortly afterwards, we had to go to another location, which was in the Remarkables in Queenstown by a lake to shoot a scene.
Well, Sean absolutely did not want to fly and said, look, I'll take the ski lift up and then I'll walk the rest of the way.
We shot there for 2 or 3 days, and our day would begin with everybody flying in the helicopters. And as we flew over at 7:30 in the morning, we'd look down, and there'd be this tiny black speck climbing the cliff. It was almost like a cliff face, and it was Sean Bean dressed up as Boromir, like a human fly on the wall, clambering up this mountainside all by himself to sort of get to the location, because he didn't want to go there and shop ahead. Like 2 hours of climbing to do.
They used to see me from the helicopter, and I was sweating at the end. It was like a real adventure getting over that sort of mountain to get to the set, but I preferred doing it that way.
So the design of the ring, many people might wonder, where did that come from? Well, one of the producers of the movie, Rick Porras, it was actually his wedding ring. Here's the story behind that.
Rick Porras, our co-producer, was there during one of these discussions one day about the ring. And
the next day, we ended up shooting this little sequence where we all sort of played these different characters. And we needed a prop, so I pulled off my wedding ring.
And action. Frodo!
When we were done, I said, Pete, I actually think that, obviously I'm biased, but I really like the way my wedding ring looks.
And, everyone loves their wedding ring. But anyway, it had a sort of shape to it that just had a nuance that was slightly different from the others. And so we took that with us the next time we went to Jens Hansen to talk about the design of the ring. And
making some adjustments after that, they kind of rounded it off a bit, but sort of they used that as, I guess, a basic starting point for the one ring.
And action.
So there's a lot of Viggo Mortensen, Aragorn pieces of the Iceberg, and this is just another one that, makes him so endearing to a lot of the fans, which is Viggo Mortensen bonded so much with his horse that after the movie was done, he bought his horse and Arwen's horse. And yeah, basically he just bought them from the movie and has them. Here's some other cast injuries that you might have not known about, like Sean Astin, Dominic Monaghan, and Orlando Bloom, that affected the film production and was shown in the appendices.
I was involved in a close near-death experience, really. It was kind of traumatic. We were filming this scene where the hobbits run to the Brandywine Bridge and get on the ferry. We were rehearsing, running very fast as we could down this wooden bridge, and then jumping onto the ferry.
And then in one of the times, as we ran down to get to the ferry, Dom got a wooden splinter through his foot.
An amazingly tough splinter, I think probably made of titanium.
You think somebody cut his leg off? The sweat was pouring off him.
Like every time I put pressure on my foot, it was just an excruciating pain, like going up my foot.
I thought he was going to pass out at one point, and everybody thought it was something really, really kind of serious.
And I was saying to all the boys, I was saying to Elijah and Sean and Billy, I said, you've got to come over and see them take this splinter out, because it's going to be a whopper, It's going to be like this big, and I'm going to get it framed.
And they take out this tiny splinter, and I was like, I cannot believe you made that fuss over that splinter.
I kept the splinter, still got it.
So after that, whenever Dom did something, he'd start sweating. If anything happened, I'd say, splinter, are you okay? And he'd be like,
His foot had virtually been completely impaled on this shard of glass.
When they took the prosthetic off, it was a big, old, deep gash in the foot. I mean, it was a substantial cut.
Oh my God!
It's a lot of blood, man.
Mike will get a
It's a lot of blood. Probably gonna need a bit.
He fell off his horse, and the scale double of Gimli fell on top of Orlando and broke his rib.
I'd scored an injury. Do you know what I mean? I was the first one to score an injury, and I think there was a little bit of jealousy that like, the hobbits didn't get the opportunity to fall off a horse and break a rib.
it's a painful thing, and it's nothing to be sniggered at. And when he told us, we were, God, are you all right and stuff?
It was painful. It was very painful.
And then when he told us the next day, oh, that's terrible. Is it not getting any better?
Obviously, it was just a rib, and I went and had it checked out, and I was on set again the next day, so it was fine. Just part of the job.
A week later, cracked rib? Oh, is it still cracked, is it? Right, okay.
My lungs are hurting. I feel like my pancreas has been split. I think my spleen has been ostracised.
Whinging. Oh, really?
And babes, it hurts, and I can't ride the horse, and now babes.
And since then, I've heard it in a few interviews as well, and I think it's still healing.
They can be fragile. The elves, particularly the Mirkwood strain.
That's so funny.
No, but seriously, I mean, it was about sucking it up and...
The full length of the trilogy, theatrical, is around 9 hours and 17 minutes. But for the real Lotr heads, we're only watching the extended edition. And that comes in at 11 hours and 22 minutes. Oscar sweep. Return of the King was such a successful movie that it definitely got recognized at the Oscars. And here's the behind the scenes about that moment and how the cast reacted to them winning so many Oscars that night.
The Oscar goes to Grant Major for Lord of the Rings, Dan Hennon and Alan Lee for the set decoration.
But that was the first one up, and they won, and it was like this incredible cheering in the group and this feeling of yay, and the night became enjoyable from that point.
And as it started to unfold, you were just so worried that you were going to be the department that broke the line of success.
And when we just kept winning award after award, I didn't believe it. I sort of felt like, oh my God, is this happening? Wait, do we have to stand up again? Quick, smile.
I think everyone who won an award on this would have traded in those awards to make sure that Peter Jackson got Best Director.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steven Spielberg.
I think we all were quite nervous as Steven Spielberg walked on the stage. There's no way to really describe what that feels like, to be sitting in an audience at the Oscars, awaiting your fate or your film's fate for that final award.
And the Oscar goes to... It's a clean sweep. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
They announced it, and we all kind of jumped up and were hugging each other and, completely excited. And then Peter said, well, you gotta come up here.
I wanted to be on that stage. I wanted it so bad. And when we walked up there, it just felt like, this is it. This is what it feels like to win the World Series. This is what it feels like to win the Super Bowl.
He had a table, and everybody put their Oscars on the table. So there's like 20 Oscars lined up.
That was pretty incredible. It was the first time I saw Peter in awe of something.
New Zealand as Middle Earth. So I wrote that because, simply put, New Zealand was the location where most of Lord of the Rings was shot, and it was used as a backdrop of Middle Earth. And Peter Jackson stated that he thought it just felt like that when he was reading the books growing up. A lot of people might not know that's where it was shot, but it was, and I could go into so many more details about where Edoras was and where this and that was, but for just the basic and the most first tier level of the theatrical part of the Iceberg, New Zealand is Middle Earth. I guess if you didn't know, now you know. Cameos. So when it comes to cameos, Peter Jackson is known to be a little bit of a savant at acting. And there's 3 famous scenes that a lot of people know that you'll see. And then there's also other ones that people might not know about. Like some kids were in the film of certain actors, like Viggo Mortensen's son, Philippa Boyne's son, Sean Astin's daughter, Peter Jackson's kids, and they're littered throughout the movie. And then you have people who worked on production, design, executive producers, cinematographers, in different roles as well. Like, for example, the Corsairs of Umbar, which you'll see. It actually has Andrew Lesnie, it has Rick Porras, it has Richard Taylor. Some of the geniuses behind the design of a lot of the characters and things like that. Even Peter Jackson, you know, he has this famous moment where he gets shot with an arrow. I mean, the movie is just littered with cameos. And I mean, there's so many to like put and compile, but those are some of the main ones. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed just part 1 of this Iceberg. Depending on how it goes, I might do the second part and the third, fourth, you know what I'm saying? But hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and peace.